Hi, I'm Andy Lamy. I am a musician, bird watcher, birder, play with a symphony orchestra on the clarinet, but I also do breeding bird survey for the Northeast Temperate Network Inventory and Monitoring Program. So I have to identify birds by ear, and for years and years I've been involved with leading bird tours and doing Christmas bird counts, etc. And years ago in Africa, leading a bird watching tour, I used one of my improvised birdsong whistles and called in to view a greater swamp warbler, which in the Afro-Eurasian theater of birds is a very rare bird that's also even more rarely seen because it hides in the reeds, in canebrakes and reed beds, and it never shows itself. So my author friend Clive Barlow had actually never seen one of these alive. He'd seen them road-killed or he'd misnetted them and captured them in this way. But this was the first one just taking a perch in clear view. And it was at that time I decided to start producing these whistles. And I've come up with sort of a soprano, alto, tenor, bass kind of breakdown of the whistles. They're really all sopranos, actually. Everything from a somewhat larger owl and dove whistle, which is large enough to have some capability for the sculpting of an owl finial or some engravure. And then the Oriole grosbeak whistle, which is a nice size, the most versatile whistle of all perhaps, getting all the way down into the screech owl range of the voice, 400 hertz roughly, and then going all the way up into the ultra highs, probably near 9,000 hertz, 9,500 hertz, near the top of a piano. So this has got a nice round sound for the mid-range, like cardinal or oriole, shrike, that would sing in that range. Another very versatile whistle is the warbler whistle, and this one again has a pretty big range, but really specializes in the higher, thinner sounds like the warblers, and can do a lot of the coniferous species that really sing the high pitches like the kinglets or the firecrest, goldcrest, old world warblers, all the way up to the white-throated sparrows and even blackbirdian warbler, which will go all the way to 11,000 hertz, and do that with a fairly sweet sound. So it can be played with a thinner, lighter, sweeter touch, and can be used in the wild to actually capture the interest of these birds. Another one that's very interesting, it's sort of modeled after a tin whistle with actual tone hole, is what I call a thrush whistle, and actually has tone holes that are spaced in the voice of a Catharis thrush. You can do wood thrush sounds or hermit thrush and other things. So the actual tone holes, instead of being tuned do, re, mi, it really follows that sort of augmented chord that thrushes trace with their quantum leaps in their flute-like sound. This last little whistle here is the smallest of the family. This little chickadee whistle, as I call it, again, really plays the coniferous species and gives a very thin, sweet, light touch to the high frequencies. So you're able to play things like the black-capped chickadee, without breaking the ears of the people around you, if you ever wanted to do that. Another nice application of this, which has been done in several classical or modern classical symphonic pieces of music, is to create actual birdsong, to imitate it on stage or surrounding the audience, to create sort of a dawn chorus effect. And it's a little nicer and more interesting to have this done live, have people actually learn about individual real bird songs and play them on these whistles instead of just using a recording. We've also made dawn chorus recordings out of all of these different individual component songs. So you might have birds singing in a dawn chorus, but somewhat sparsely. And when you're closer to dawn, it really is quite a thickly layered texture. And sometimes you have 10 birds singing at once and alternating. If you take a 10 or 15 minute sample of real birdsong at dawn in June, you'll get possibly in one location up to 30 birds. So it's an interesting way to try to use art to imitate life and learn more about the actual scientific world and giving yourself a chance to enjoy being a bird. So let me just show you a little bit more of these. This can do a golden-crowned kinglet. If I sort of gurgle a little bit, some sort of trilling that will quickly articulate my airstring, I can get a very nice golden-crowned kinglet. And it's convincing enough that it will bring in kinglets and chickadees and perhaps a sapsucker or perhaps a red-headed woodpecker or something else that is even more interesting to you than the actual bird that you're calling. Also, it just doesn't have to be perfect to get the interest of other birds. That's part of the magic of interspecial curiosity with birds. Sometimes they're investigating a new sound because they want to make sure it's not a threat or not some sort of opportunity for the flock. Birds are also in the habit of calling when they see a predator, doing alarm calls and things, and then a flock of small birds, a mixed winter flock, for example, they'll gather around, and some that are bolder will take the lead and sort of challenge that bird, maybe approaching it, scolding it. But before the really aggressive crows and blue jay types will get in and start dive bombing, you have the effect of this group of curious and interested birds that approach and look and call. And so with one of these whistles, even without creating a perfect bird song yourself, you can start that effect of sort of mobbing or investigation or curiosity on the part of a flock of birds. So there are birds that are very shy and retiring, like the greater swamp warbler, or perhaps a Connecticut warbler, which is sort of high, middle, and low notes that trace in a rhythm. With a little practice, getting that cadence, and even just the general shape of the song, it might be close enough to get it to come out and investigate you. Also, if you have Connecticut warbler on your wish list of birds that you want to see, you could, in your own home, listen to some Connecticut warbler songs, perhaps look at and see the sonograms, the graphical analysis of that warbler song, and then try to imitate that. Try to just follow the shape and the cadence with your ear and with the pitch, and that can be the beginning of imitating a bird song pretty well. A nice example there, this is the warbler whistle. Let's do a field sparrow. They are known to have a song that reminds people of a ping pong ball bouncing on a table. It's got a little bit of an acceleration to it. Maybe something like da 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 da. But when you really listen to it, it usually has a down slurred pitch, like, and then as it accelerates, those down slurs concatenate in a rising phrase like this. I've fooled a lot of field sparrows enough to have them come within view and start singing back. The owl-dove whistle create a screech owl sound for a mobbing behavior of birds in the daytime, or to actually try to see a screech owl, or perhaps another high-pitch owl like saw-whet. If you don't have the pucker whistle ability, you can take many of these whistles. They have overlapping ranges. So it's very easy. So a screech owl could be, you can shake this as you expand to give the quavering tremolo, or if you can do the gurgling sound, you can get the. You can even do Western screech owl on this, which is more of a low frequency, hollow sounding ping pong ball dropping on a table kind of sound. Again, an owl hears that and it gets their attention. It's close enough that it'll almost certainly get a response if the owl is in the mood to respond. Of course, whenever I go out with a group and we want to see owls, we're at the mercy of the season and the time of night, whether they want to actually come. Sometimes they've just ingested a rodent and they're feeling too full to exhibit a territorial response or approach you. More likely than not, they're actually flying around and investigating a sound, even if you can't figure out where they're going. All right, so that's really the basic group of whistles. Here's the Oriole grosbeak. This particular one has some cocobolo wood on it, Brazilian tulip wood, which has sort of a reddish quality. There are some African blackwood, the Empingo d'Albergia, that we use for clarinets and oboes and other instruments. And there's a nice delrin, which is a plastic, sort of a metal substitute, which can be milled to a very, very fine degree and polished. And it's great because it's pretty indestructible outdoors. So here's this cocobolo Oriole grosbeak whistle. And if you wanted to imitate a cardinal, doing that high to low slur, so I'm going to stand up just to show this a little better, how the slide is working. I've got a spring that I've attached onto most of these whistles. And the spring is sort of a frequency guide. It gives me a stopping point so that the plunger inside doesn't actually go into the window. And it also gives me a bit of feeling and memory for how high and low along the rod there we are, so that we can repeat sounds pretty easily. That's just to where the string starts, and then I can compress the string for higher notes, which means I could go using the feel of the string tension to hit exactly the same pitches each time with just a little practice. Or starting there. A lot of people ask, which birds can I do with that whistle? And the fact is, these whistles are each capable of doing thousands of possible songs. Kind of like, how many songs can you play on a violin? Well, who's playing it? How much have they learned? How much of the repertoire have they brought in? Are they able to improvise? So you can do a lot of bird songs on a violin, by the way. It can be pretty convincing if it's a violinist who knows birdsong and is willing to slide up and down the fingerboard. It works very much the same way. The real difference between violin, viola, cello, bass, in a lot of ways, since those instruments have some overlap. Violin and viola, for example, share 3 out of 4 strings. Violin has an E string, viola has a C string down below, but there's this overlap. And the real difference is color and depth in the sound, how much body there is. So really that's true here too. So virtually all of these whistles can do most bird songs. But if you really want to have a deep sounding owl, I've got some prototype owl dove whistles that really are made of copper, very heavy, hard to carry around in the forest. They're almost heavier than the spotting scope. But with this diameter of whistle, you get depth in the sound, and it's unmistakable. You really hear the comparison is if I were to play the same pitch on multiple whistles. So if I go up higher in the range of this broad diameter whistle and do, here's a slightly less wide diameter owl dove whistle. If I play those same pitches, it has a perkier sound, less depth, less tubby, less hooty and mellow, more sprightly, brilliant perhaps, maybe thinner, depending on where you are in the comparison. So if I compare this with the overlap of the next one up, the Oriole grosbeak, I can play some pretty high notes on these. So that's where that next whistle up, it's gonna have enough diameter breadth to give some mellow quality to those grosbeak sounds. How about rose-breasted grosbeak, which has that up and down sing-songy phrase like a robin, but travels higher and lower. Whereas robins tend to break their phrase and, like Catharis thrushes, it's a tortoise thrush, but it'll have that thrush-like quantum leap in the sound. So in these whistles you can get a little bit of chirping, like so we can do the same on the warbler whistle as the Oriole grosbeak. It does a lot of the same range. It's just got a slightly perkier sound to it. With this smaller and smaller diameter, it's going to really change the amount of depth you have. If I hum, like Jethro Tull, getting those jazzy, buzzy sounds on the flute, using the humming of the voice while playing to get the buzz, if I do that, then you'll hear a little hum up close, but the bird will hear a very convincing buzzy timbre, like prairie warbler. The same can be done to create the effect of the scarlet tanager, which is supposed to be a robin singing with a sore throat. It's got a little bit more of a burr, and a little bit of humming. That gives you the sound of the scarlet tanager in comparison. Now, similar in size and diameter to the warbler whistle is this little tin whistle, except the tone holes have been chosen not to outline a scale of human music, but to follow the thrushes. It can be combined with other whistles for some nice effects. So you can get the helminthoros, the hermit thrush sound, kind of ethereal. There's a cameo from Murphy the dog. Hey Murph. He likes those thrush sounds also. Really, for concert purposes and for learning and for just the sheer enjoyment of playing, I have to say, the thrush whistle is really hard to beat. One more look at the chickadee whistle, just because of the timbre discussion. Here's where we can play the high notes just as the warbler whistle could, but you can get a very sweet sound. So I can do a bay-breasted warbler and really get that thin, pure, or perhaps a brown creeper. You could even do a winter wren if you can gurgle fast enough. Old world troglodytes, the classic wren from Irish folk, sings like 16 to 18 notes per second. And then the northeastern winter wren here gives us about 24 to 28 notes per second. And then the western species, the Northwest, California, and up into the Pacific Northwest, Alberta, that winter wren can sing something like 32 notes per second. So I would try to do it by giving some sort of a gurgle inside that's faster than single or even double tonguing would give on a woodwind instrument. And it's a rising and falling long phrase. And you hear this by waterfalls on up in the Adirondacks or up in Canada or in Michigan, the Upper Peninsula. You can hear the winter wren singing in spring and summer. These long strings of very fluty, silvery phrases and notes. So with a little practice, you can get good enough at it that you will fool a winter wren and you'll get them singing. It's a real pleasure to have a duet with a bird when it comes to the edge of its territory where you're creating this sound and will actually sing with you back and forth. And I've never seen any harm come to a bird from doing that. Finally, I just wanted to say, a lot of percussionists, concert percussionists and flutists, they all seem to be immediately part of the bird whistle family. There are a lot of things that percussionists carry around to do sound effects, and it seems that this set of whistles really covers, if you learn your birdsong, most of the lyrical, the actual toneful bird songs that can be created. There are even whistles, insert a slide that has a loose plunger that doesn't quite fit. You get a raptor and shorebird, and it's less lyrical, less of a songbird, but sort of gives that breaking sound that so many shorebirds. Golden plovers, they can do falcons, all kinds of things. The process of hearing a birdsong that you want to learn more about and trying to imitate it and just finding the tool that pairs with it the best and trying to recreate that sound is a great journey that would make you a better concert musician, a better teacher, a better bird watcher, and something fun to do on a rainy day. So thanks a lot, and hopefully we'll follow up and answer some more questions, how they're made and how specifically to play them and how to care for them. Take care.